Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third digital North American FP&A board. Today we are going to talk about those top trends that are shaping FP&A this year and beyond. My name is Larissa Malnichuk, Managing Director and founder of International FP&A Board and FP&A Trends Group, and I'm here today to facilitate this discussion for us. Just a quick reminder about the agenda. So we are going to talk about all of those top trends, and those are going to be about xP&A, the role of technology, what is really forcing a digital transformation, FP&A business partnering, integrated business planning, and a T-shaped FP&A professional as well. There will be conclusions and recommendations for you. There will be Q&A session as well. And just a quick reminder about our previous discussions, the subjects that we discussed in our 8 chapters of North American FP&A board. Obviously, the last 2 meetings and today's meeting we are doing digitally. The previous ones, they were face-to-face meetings. And I'm so happy actually to welcome today representatives of 45 countries. So I see all the information here. So 45 countries, more than 660 registrations, but the majority of you are coming from Canada, 17%, and US, 66%. So it's really a global meeting. And now I would like to invite all our panelists to switch on their cameras. And now we'll do a very quick introduction. So please, if you can do so. Hello, everyone. So global panel as well from North America and Europe. And the first panelist is Pras Chatterjee, who is Senior Director at SAP. Pras is a former practitioner, FP&A practitioner, and he is very, very proud of his experience in analytical transformation, and he's very passionate about this subject as well. Pras, you're welcome.
Great, thank you so much, Larissa. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. The next panelist is also from North America, Alex Baer. He's Global Director Financial Planning and Analysis at Guardian Industries. Alex is very interested in integration, and he implemented FP&A integrated process and system as well in his organization, and he's going to share his experience with us. Hi, Alex. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Larissa.
Thank you so much. The next panelist is Chris Saher, who is Chief Financial Officer at Zeta Incorporated. Joining us from New York, Chris is a member of our FP&A board in New York, and also a lot of experience in particular FP&A business partnering and scenario planning and all the analytical things that shaping FP&A at the moment. Chris, you're welcome.
Good afternoon, good day, everyone.
The next panelist is another representative from Europe, Mark De Haas, joining us from Amsterdam and the Netherlands. He's Global Finance Director at Cargill, and he's going to share with us the latest trends that are happening in the area of FP&A business partnering, namely FP&A business partnering of the next normal. Mark, you're welcome.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Larissa. Happy to be here.
Thank you, and glad to see you here, Mark. And then we have Tom Hood, who is CEO at Maryland Association of CPAs and also a Business Learning Institute. Tom joins us from Washington, D.C., and he's going to talk about the latest trends in FP&A professional, namely T-shaped finance professional. Tom, you're welcome. So happy to have you here.
It's great to be here, Larissa. Hello to everybody, and thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So looking forward to this very interesting discussion. A quick introduction of my background. So I'm based in the UK, just outside of London. Obviously, in the UK, we are on very strict lockdown, so joining from my home office. I'm a qualified British accountant, member of CIMA, and also I'm a certified FP&A professional. Though this is my company, FP&A Trends Group, we established 8 chapters in North America. You can see those cities. This year, last year, we were planning to open some additional chapters, but now we are planning face-to-face meetings in the second half of the year. So hope to meet with many of you face-to-face. Also, the latest trends that happening, we created the best practice workshops and some advisory services recently. Just a quick introduction about this particular webinar. So it will be 90 minutes meeting. Your participation is welcome. We will have 4 polling questions on different subjects, and please, if you can vote and share your experience. There will be Q&A session, and please, if you can start asking questions straight away as you hear presentations and when you have your questions. You can use the chat box for this. Then networking is obviously very important. So please, if you would like to connect with our speakers through LinkedIn, you're welcome. Just mention this webinar, please. And then presentation is available for you as a handout. You can download from this webinar, and you will receive the recording of this meeting within 1 or 2 days with the copy of presentation as well. And obviously, it's so important for us to hear your feedback. So at the end of the meeting, if you can briefly answer the questions of our survey. So this is the plan. And our speakers, you can switch off your cameras now. I'll give just a couple of introductory slides. So thank you so much. Before we start, I would like to say thank you so much to our global partner and sponsor, SAP, one of the world's leading provider of modern FP&A solutions. And we would like to also welcome and to say thank you to our information partner, Business Learning Institute. Thank you so much for partnering with us for this particular webinar. And then let us start. It's my introductory slide, and this is how we shaped those 10 trends that our panelists see, those trends that are shaping year 2021 and beyond. You can see that we are going to talk about xP&A, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, integrated FP&A, scenario management, predictive analytics, the next normal FP&A business partnering, what it is bridging the strategy execution gap, what does it mean and what is the role of FP&A, then about driver-based performance management, and finally, T-shaped FP&A professionals. So the time is now to start to think and to talk about the trends in extended planning and analysis, artificial intelligence and machine learning in FP&A, and robotics process automation in FP&A. And I would like to invite our first panelist, Pras Chatterjee, Senior Director at SAP, to share your experience, to share your passion, to share your vision. Pras, the stage is yours. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you everyone for having me here. I'm going to spend some time now talking about what I feel from my perspective, and obviously through discussions with many of you and through the surveys you all have filled out, the role of FP&A technology in terms of the vision going forward. So, the crystal ball that I foresee in terms of how we're going to use these technologies. So let's move forward. So as I mentioned before, I was going to talk about technologies, but before I talk about technology, let me take a step back and talk about a mindset that I see. The mindset that I see is effectively that organizations such as yourselves and all of us as FP&A practitioners, we're going to move away from this mantra of corporate performance management or enterprise performance management, business performance management, and into this new realm that we call extended planning and analysis. In the past, and for some of you, enterprise performance management, or CPM, is really more of a top-down planning strategy. CFOs and C-level executives meet, they give targets, or targets are spread down. Oftentimes, it's really just managing performance through budgets and forecasts, just quick variance analysis. If you can meet those variance analysis targets, you've accomplished your tasks. And really, the whole concept of budgeting and forecasting was heavily entrenched in the office of the CFO. And worst of all, in my opinion, A lot of this is aligned with consolidations. If in fact, many of you that buy planning technologies often buy a consolidation technology along with it. There really is no rhyme or reason. I mean, consolidation technology is to look backwards and state what's happened, whereas planning is really about looking forward and looking ahead. So in terms of looking ahead, we all need to adopt, and I think you will in 2021 and beyond, this new mantra of extended planning analysis. The idea of bringing together plans across the enterprise. We know that everybody plans. Marketers plan. Marketers plan their campaigns based on sales targets. Salespeople plan, and when they plan their sales, they also plan their incentive compensation, which also leads to HR targets for headcount and maybe contractors. Those same sales targets lead to maybe S&OP type planning. So as you can see, everyone plans. The key for finance now is to bring those plans all together using modern technology into one single environment for a 360 view of your plans. Next slide, please. The next piece that we're going to talk about that I think that's going to grow exponentially in 2021 is a whole idea behind artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that's going to help you as planners make much more confident decisions. The idea behind AI and machine learning in the past was a bit frightening or maybe off to the far future, but it's actually come hit all of us full steam ahead. And the idea behind that is that modern planning solutions have machine learning and AI built right into the solution. You don't need a team of data scientists. You don't need an advanced degree in statistics. You as FP&A practitioners have the ability to marry your historical data, your actuals, with machine learning algorithms, as well as the business acumen that you yourself possess, the knowledge that you have, the business permutations and combinations that might occur. Bring all of this together to accelerate your planning with data-driven forecasts. The idea behind these forecasts are that you're able to drive more scenario planning. The pandemic clearly showed that during this pandemic time, there were times when FP&A, you guys, were the business came to you and said, what is the effect of X, Y, and Z? All these different scenarios. What is the impact of a disruption in our supply chain? A disruption in our sales, an increase in costs, a decrease in cost potentially. What is the impact of all of these individually as well as collectively? And having to basically build those scenarios and adopting machine learning and AI algorithms to help complement these scenarios to separate the best-in-class planning departments from the planning departments that just could not add value or provide the answers to those questions. And that really we're stuck in a world of, I'll get back to you later. So the idea behind this is to leverage this technology that is readily and easily available at your fingertips and marry that with the human intelligence that you all possess for a best-in-class FP&A department. Next slide, please. The third piece I want to talk about for 2021 and forward is a whole concept of robotic process automation. Now, this might seem like a stretch. It might seem like something that's far away, but the reality is that it's been in your labs, it's been in your lives, probably as far as you can remember. We've all adopted FP&A. The idea is that in the past, many of us have worked with very complex spreadsheets that we shouldn't have worked with, but spreadsheets we work with because we didn't invest in FP&A technology. But within these spreadsheets, some of you, many of you, maybe a few of you have had very complex VB formulas and VB scripts that you had to outsource to someone else, or you did it by yourself with very little, with lots of sophistication, where you took data, CSV files and data files, brought them into Excel, and with that, you ran a VB script, and this VB script parsed the data by columns, commas, rows, or whatnot, based on different permutations and combinations of things that might occur. And based on that, let you load that into a planning model or into a bigger Excel file. That was your first start into RPA, amongst many others that might have occurred. We all know that planning is a very repetitive process. And if we can move to the next slide, please. We know that as part of this repetitive process, there are things that can be done that make our lives easier. What I feel that's going to happen going forward in 2021 and beyond is the idea that we often as practitioners are called financial planning and analysis practitioners. But what we're going to concentrate on in 2020 and beyond is the A, not the financial planning. That's the easy part. The whole idea behind scenario-based plans, planning for your budgets in August, doing the updates in November, in April, in February, or whatnot, and doing forecasts once a month. That's all repetitive. That can easily be done through RPA, where it can take your data files from your different actual systems, your ERP, your HRIS system, your supply chain system, bringing them into your planning tool, and really let you guys focus on automation and analysis. And the idea behind this is that not just the automation of bringing data forward, automation of creating reports that are sent out, automation of variance analysis, automation of seeding your budgets and forecasts. I mean, how many of you spend time when it comes to creating your next forecast or next budget? Spend those precious minutes, precious hours, this precious time that some of you as VPs or directors or CFOs task onto your subordinates that effectively wasted their time and waste their time from analyzing and make them do these mundane tasks that can be easily repeated. So let's all focus on automating these tasks. Next slide, please. So to sum up what I was talking about, ultimately it's about high value added tasks. We've all been in this world of repetitive tasks that's slowly been getting, smaller and smaller. We've been increasing the force of automation. And what this will mean to our profession overall is that we are going to focus on high value added tasks. We're going to focus on that A in financial planning and analysis because we're going to use machine learning, AI, RPA, and everything else associated with that going forward, and extended planning analysis to be the best FP&A department possible. Thank you. And next slide, please.
I think this is the timing now for the commentaries from our panelists. Pras, thank you so much for your thought leadership. Thank you for your vision. Yes, I would like to invite Alex and Chris to switch on their cameras. And just before, I would like to share with you that, yes, xP&A, this is a huge trend at the moment, but nothing new for us in FP&A because we've been observing this at least for the last 5 years, how FP&A is going just outside the finance area, but definitely in the year 2021 and beyond, it's going to expand, it's going to accelerate, it's going to be really huge. And of course, RPA and artificial intelligence, machine learning for FP&A, we see a lot of cases, and it's very interesting to observe how companies are moving to the next analytical level of their development. Alex, what would be your commentary on this presentation?
Well, I want to congratulate Pras. It was a very insightful presentation. You will see that a lot of the things he's talked about, I'm also going to talk in my presentation because that's what I see on my practice that it's going on. And I totally agree. I think that in order to create value from FP&A, we need to have integration with all the capabilities and function of the company rather than staying in our own finance silo. We need to have forward insight and not just a rear view mirror reporting. And we need to leverage technology to minimize the transactional and those repetitive work that doesn't add value and spend more and more time into providing insight to the business so they can make better decisions. So I think it was spot on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your commentary. Chris, what would be your insights? What is happening in your world in terms of those trends that Pras identified?
I think I'd piggyback on your comment, Larissa, is that I think everyone on this call, if they're in FP&A, they have probably experienced some of this trend, or they at least are intellectually aware that these trends are happening. But since the pandemic started, we've probably all viscerally experienced the uptick in high-value tasks, which I and Alex and a couple of other panelists will be talking about in more detail. So if you haven't been pulled into those high-value tasks, you will be shortly, and if you are, and you're still also doing lots of repetitive tasks, there's going to be a lot of pressure on you now to really accelerate automation so that you can focus on the stuff that has that visibility, the high value things.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Pras. Let us check what is happening in the world of our participants at the moment. So we would like to open the first polling question. I'm launching the first polling question for you. And please, if you can start voting as soon as you see the question. So has your organization already went on xP&A journey yet? And please choose one of those that is the best description for you. The first option is yes, my organization has already made a move in that direction. We updated FP&A structure tools to move in that direction. My organization may adopt in a few years, or we don't believe that financial planning and analysis needs any cross-functional strategy. So please, if you can continue to vote, more than 50% of you voted, just a few seconds, please continue. And I'm about to close the poll, and I'm about to share the results with all of you. So this is what we see at the moment. So we can see that 21% of organizations already started this journey, extended planning and analysis journey, went just outside of finance. 36% of the companies already updated FP&A structure and tools to move in that direction. 40% of you think that it's still in few years, and 3% think that it's no need for FP&A to start this journey. Pras, any surprises for you? What would be your commentaries?
No surprises for me at this point in time. I mean, the reality is that I think what's surprising me is that still 40% may adopt it in a few years, which somewhat makes sense. I hope that that few years is more general, but the 3% is what really shocks me, because you know, FP&A definitely needs to be more inclusive versus exclusive.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pras. Thank you for your commentary. Alex, what would be your commentary on these answers from our participants?
Yeah, I think it's clear. I think it's clear that we FP&A believe that we can add value to the organization and be sitting at the table where decisions are made. And by adopting these platforms and helping the different functions make better decisions, that's how we get our seat at the table. So I think we all agree that we should be working on that.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Pras. Thank you so much to all of those who voted and shared your journey, your experience with us. I'm hiding the results, and we are moving towards the next 3 trends that our panelists identified. So it's about integrated FP&A process, it's about scenario management, and it's about predictive analytics as well. So it's going to be a presentation from Alex Baird, who is Global Director of Financial Planning and Analysis at Guardian Industries. Alex, the stage is yours. You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Larissa. Thanks, everyone, for being in this, and thanks for letting me participate with such a caliber group of panelists here. So I'm going to be talking from real experience. So I'm glad that we're all FP&A practitioners, and I work for a big industrial company. Guardian Industries is a fully owned subsidiary of Koch Industries. Now we have 2 big divisions: one glass division, which is the one I work for right now, and another one automotive division. On the glass division, we are a global company. We make glass in 4 continents, and we basically have 25 locations in 24 countries. So pretty global company, and we could be considered top tier as far as size. So I'm going to be talking from that point of view. Next slide, please. The first trend, and to me this trend is foundational, right? I mean, it's this integrated FP&A process or platform. And when I use the word integrated, I'm putting as an opposition of disintegrated, which is a little bit of what I found when I moved to the glass division. And we were disintegrated in 2 ways. And I'm sure it's going to be familiar to many of you. One way was that we have scattered planning models all around the company, mostly by regions, many of them in Excel, and they were not talking to each other. They were not consistent. And the second way of disintegration was that in many cases, the financial function was doing their planning in a silo without connecting to the different capabilities. So when the CEO looks at you and say, after listening to the operations guy saying that we're going to get a 10% improvement in throughput, and then they look at you and say, is that improvement in my numbers? You get a cold sweat if you can answer that question, right? So that was the second level of this integration I was talking about. So how did we go about that through this integrated FP&A process and leveraging technology? You have to leverage technology to accomplish this. And the key is to identify the profitability drivers for each capability and function in the company, and align those with their KPIs and the financials. You link those KPIs to the financial planning process, so you both speak in the same language. And then when actuals start coming in, you basically explain your financial results, not so much about deltas in EBITDA, but about which ones of the underlying drivers and KPIs were responsible for either underperforming or overperforming, right? And then from that point of view, you become a partner, a business partner of those different capabilities, because you help them understand the impact of everything they do. And when as you all know, we all have limited resources. They want to spend those resources in whatever it is that creates the bigger impact on value, right? And we have the perfect acumen and the perfect technology, the perfect knowledge to help them make those decisions. Next slide, please. The next trend that I think has accelerated, obviously this year with COVID, is this scenario management versus just financial forecasting. When the degree of uncertainty is high, as we've all experienced this year, crazy year, and if we put all the efforts into creating just one financial forecast with one set of assumptions, we have a high risk of that financial forecast to become obsolete basically right from the get-go, right? And then we're left with nothing. So instead of doing that, why don't we leverage, and that's why I said that this integrated FP&A platform is foundational. Why don't we leverage our integrated FP&A platform, and then we lay out all possible performance scenarios with the corresponding financial implications in a way that then we can prepare contingency plans. So when reality kicks in, we're barely ready to go, and we have an execution plan already laid out. That's what's going to make us more agile, and that agility and that time to react is what really drives value. In my industry, for example, we prepared different scenarios of demand as soon as the pandemic started, and that determined which actions we had to take in our furnaces for glass based on the different potential demand scenarios, right? We didn't have to wait till those are making those decisions. Once the reality came in, we were already ready to go and decided which furnaces had to be shut down, which ones we could reduce throughput, which ones should go into crushing. So you want to have all that playbook ready to go up front. Next slide, please, Larissa. And the last trend I want to talk about also, secondly, what Pras talked about, is this predictive analytic and forward insight versus traditional rear view mirror explanation, forecasted variance, and so on. I think it's expected from us is to develop predictive models that we can then support those key inputs that we define, again, in our foundational FP&A model. So those key drivers, those key profitability drivers, they all have key inputs. And those key inputs are the ones that we want to be able to predict with higher level of accuracy. And for that, now we have technology that is available to us in order to create predictive advanced models, machine learning, predictive analytics with internal and external data, combining business insight with the data science expertise. In my experience, I think I recommend that you start small, that you just focus on an area that is highly impactful, and focus on that area. For us, for example, is pricing, demand, and product mix. It's very impactful to us. So we are starting we're in the infant stages, but we're starting with that. We want to basically keep refining through several iterations, and again, use our internal business insight and acumen in order to influence those models and make them better as we go. And that's basically what I had on my presentation, Larissa.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing your practical experience with us. And now I would like to ask Pras and Chris to switch on their cameras and to give their key subject matter commentaries on those on your presentations. So Chris, what would be your commentary?
Yeah, so I mean, I really like Alex's perspective here, and I think what's important for everyone on the call to understand is that we're not always going to get it right, especially in such a volatile environment. We're not. So what we can do, though, is communicate clear assumptions of what we are building into our models, essentially. You know, what do we think is happening in the market? How is it impacting the drivers in our model, and what assumptions are we making? We can be very clear about that. And if there is a variance, now we can actually talk about it with our business partners using this common language we've developed with them, which is talking about those drivers and what the impact is and what it means for the business going forward. By doing that, by showing that we understand what happened and what it means for the business, we're demonstrating continuously to our business partners and other stakeholders that we have a grip on the business.
Thank you so much, Chris. Pras, what would be your commentaries about those trends?
Yeah, I mean, I loved the part of scenario management. I mean, I think that was just absolutely brilliant, Alex. You know, I come across too many companies that are in need of planning solutions, and they say that, oh, we can't do anything now because our planning cycle doesn't start till next year. I mean, who cares about your planning cycle? At the end of the day, you know, if you're really focused on scenario management, as Alex indicated, you're bringing in, you know, FP&A as a foundation to bring all the information together, and then you're preparing contingency plans. So it's not a matter of, you know, you plan once a year, you update the budget, you do forecasts. That's such a waste of time. I mean, the fact that Alex talked about integrating FP&A, integrating all the variables, doing contingency plans based on scenarios, and then, you know, align and in an agile manner once you know all the variables. That's really what organizations should be doing. That's how FP&A adds true value. So, you know, I love that versus forecasting. Like, it's really key to be doing scenario management.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pras. Once again, thank you for this great presentation, Alex. And now it's a good timing to hear what is happening in the world of our practitioners, of our participants. So the next polling question, we would like to know how would you describe your current scenario planning, scenario management process? So I'm launching poll right now. Please, can you start voting as soon as you can? So how would you describe your current scenario planning, scenario management process? And please choose one of those answers that is the best description for you. It's non-existent, it's very traditional. For example, you do only worst, best, average case scenarios. It's also very, very long process as well for you. Or you play many scenarios, but they are not multidimensional, or your scenario planning is real-time and multidimensional, the best in class. So if you can continue to vote, more than 55% of you voted, now more than 60, just a few seconds, and I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the results with everyone. Quite interesting results, quite encouraging results as well. I can see that 7% of you already started to play scenarios practically in real time, at different levels of your organization. 25% of you play scenarios, but it's not multidimensional, high level. But 53% of you play scenarios, but it's very traditional and very long process. And 15% of you have non-existent scenario planning capabilities. So I would like to ask Alex to comment on this. So what would you comment?
Very much in line with my expectation. Obviously, we all learn a lot during this past year, and we're going to give more emphasis to this. That is very difficult to predict reality, and we have better value by being prepared to the different range of outcomes than just going with one and putting our eggs in one basket. So I think this is going to be these numbers are going to keep changing quite a bit for the next 2-3 years. My only advice is that you need to have that integrated FP&A platform modeling. You need to have those drivers established. You need to have the technology behind, because if you start getting into this scenario planning without that technology in the back, I mean, it's really hard to do. Technology and process both. Yep.
Yes, thank you so much. Chris, what would be your commentary?
So same as Alex really, is that, even if the year was a big challenge, and for even those of you that are voting for very traditional between worst, best, and average cases, you're still making decisions there, dynamic decisions about each of the drivers in your business, and in a way you are thinking multidimensionally. So really, I think that the challenge of the coming year is, how do you move your tools and processes out of fixed cases into something a little more agile, especially as you start reporting results, and maybe they're closer to your best case than they are your average case.
Thank you so much, Chris. From my side, I would like to say that normally scenario planning process is this description of how analytically transformed, how analytically advanced is the organization. And obviously this 7%, they're already in a really good world. They can play scenarios practically in real time in different organizations. And obviously, whether they achieved this during this year or whether they were already ready to play scenarios when COVID-19 situation started, but definitely they were in the best place. But it would be interesting how situation is developing. Thank you so much for commentaries, and thank you for sharing your journeys with us. I'm hiding the results, and now this is the timing to look at next very important trend. So we were discussing this FP&A business partnering, such an important trend, but now we are talking about the next normal FP&A business partnering. Sometimes at FP&A Trends, at FP&A board, we call it digitized FP&A business partner. Chris, the microphone is yours. So Chris Saher, Chief Financial Officer at SecZeta.
It's Christopher Sachs, everyone, CFO of SecZeta. We're a Boston-based software company focused on third-party identity risk management. Prior to SecZeta, I've worked for over a decade and a half in FP&A, accounting, operations, and corporate finance roles, with leadership roles in 3 other companies in 4 different companies. So if we could talk about the next slide, that would be great. Going to be talking to you briefly about our collective experience in FP&A this past year, and then focus on the key trends we're seeing as we enter 2021. Great. So in a nutshell, a lot of the challenges we faced in 2020 will continue. However, if you're still seeing them as challenges, you might also want to start thinking about them as opportunities. And a lot of the trends that you've read about on the FP&A board website, or maybe learned about in previous webinars or forums, those are continuing, and in most cases also accelerating. So I'll talk first about our experience the past year. The fundamental mission of FP&A hasn't changed, but the activities we undertook to fulfill that mission in 2020 were probably not what you planned at the beginning of the year, certainly not for me. So in reflecting on the past 9 months and the way forward, we've divided the experience into 3 phases. Starting from the left-hand side, we don't always want to, but think for a minute on March 2020, February 2020, the high degree of uncertainty that came in the weeks and months afterwards. Some of you, the companies you work for, probably ground to a halt. Others of you, perhaps you saw an explosion in demand. And the third, and I think the largest cohort is going to be the group that had to tread water in Q2, maybe a little bit longer, and then kind of carry on cautiously while the business regained its footing. But regardless of which group you were in, those of us in FP&A were all asked the same question. What does this mean for Q2? What does this mean for Q3? What does it mean for the rest of the year? And quite frankly, no one should be better positioned than FP&A to answer this. So we to have an understanding of the drivers that could push that answer up or down. And so you can be sure that from March onwards, we were endeavoring to answer those questions, both in traditional and some non-traditional ways. Going to the previous presentation on scenario management, we were figuring out what the worst case scenario could be, what the best case might be, and then the likely way through. Many of us used zero-based budgeting techniques to manage the tough trade-offs a lot of the companies we worked for had to make. There was a lot of ad hoc analytics to foster decision-making around things like budget cuts. And why ad hoc? I think for a lot of us, the historical data we had in our CRMs and in our ERP systems might not have been applicable anymore, or we certainly had to take that information with a grain of salt. But as we got through Q2 into Q3, how did things evolve? You can't freeze your spend indefinitely. You certainly can't cut your way to growth. So in FP&A, hopefully, as I was, you were continuing to add value by providing analytics to assess trade-offs, to determine ROI, and hopefully you also experience kind of unprecedented levels of collaboration. I've heard it called radical collaboration in other parts of the business. And this is where your traditional planning cycles or planning calendars were kind of set aside for direct real-time conversations with business partners. And why is that? Because we had to rapidly turn around scenarios to support business decisions very quickly. That's one reason. And I think the other reason for collaboration is no single person has the right answer in this environment. And perhaps there's a little bit of safety in numbers in coming to some of those tough decisions. So as we go into Q4 and then into the new calendar and new fiscal year, has anyone noticed that annual planning never really ended? We kind of refreshed our view of 2020, and then we still had to deliver a 2021 annual budget, so the board has something to approve. But in reality, all that scenario planning and best and worst case scenarios and the communication around education about the drivers of the business, that's kind of been ongoing. So many of us, many of our peers that I've spoken with are now working with rolling forecasts. They've got different scenarios they're managing, and they're adapting as actuals come in so that they can capitalize on the trends that they're seeing. And so, yeah, I mean, as we get out of the calendar year into the new year, the business wants and really requires that flexibility. And for many of us, that continued collaboration that we saw when the crisis was at its worst is continuing. And the enhanced analytics we've produced, that also kind of has to continue. But this brings on additional pressures and additional challenges, which, as I mentioned, are also opportunities. So if we can move on to the next slide. Great. So I want to give an example, rather than talk through these bullets, I actually want to give kind of an example from my own experience the last 9 months that kind of illustrates all 3 bullets. So I support, or I should say my team and I support the marketing department. This collaboration the past 6 months has gone well beyond your traditional OpEx budget management. That is because the marketing team had to return a lot of budget when physical events were canceled, but they still had goals around building brand awareness and generating opportunities. But now they're starting with a blank slate, so essentially zero-based budgeting. So why was it important for FP&A to get involved in this instance? Well, we're an early stage software company, and sales productivity, specifically annual recurring revenue and new customer count, are the primary metrics of the business. And the forward-looking indicators of those metrics are leads and pipeline. You want to know where your business is going, you must understand what's influencing these metrics and what is driving those trends. So when marketing needed help to better understand what events could still build brand and awareness and generate leads and opportunities, you can be sure we were sitting right alongside them to help them understand it. So we were essentially taking lead and pipeline data from our CRM and associating it with our campaign spend, so the actual program spend OpEx, and coming up with an ROI investment so that we could very simply communicate to marketing and other stakeholders, for every $1 of OpEx you spend on event A, you're getting this many leads back. So let's call it 3 leads. And for every $1 you're investing in event B, we're getting $5 back. So which one would you rather invest in? I'm oversimplifying, but the reality is we had to get to a methodology that could substantiate and hopefully replace some of the gut level decision making we were seeing. So having actual evidence of more opportunities coming from specific events enables the marketing department and their stakeholders to understand why we're doubling down on white papers versus more webinars, or why we're partnering with this research analytics team and not this other research analytics group. So hopefully that covers all three bullets. That example intended to. It would be great to know either in the chat or following on, if your experience has been the same. But certainly for the panelists on this call, we've all had to give that heightened level of support. We've all had to participate in this kind of radical collaboration. And I think we as a panel are unanimous that we can't take that away anymore. So you can, once you've given it to them, their expectations have been reset. So how do you cope with that? Because you can't operate in crisis mode forever. Well, I'm going to call back to process presentation at the beginning of the session here, is that, automation and process efficiency are the only way to get through this, quite frankly. 2021 is still fraught with uncertainty, and a G&A function like us, we're frankly going to be the last people to get additional budget. So the pressure is on us to ensure that our data warehouse is mature, that our processes are mature, and that we are driving automation ourselves. This means partnering with your IT organization, and it means getting or hiring in project management skills, because you're going to have to drive change cross-functionally, and that's going to require a framework and a project management approach to hold people accountable. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Larissa and the panel for commentary. Larissa?
Chris, thank you so much. I would like to ask Mark and Tom to comment on this, to switch on your cameras. And Mark, what would be your particular commentaries on this particular trend, FP&A business partnering?
Sure, and thanks, Chris, for sharing that. Although I'm not sure if I really have to thank you, because it brought back memories from the March and April period that we all went through. So we also went through this survival mode. I don't think we ever got out of the stabilization mode, but are now anxiously waiting for the next black swan. So I think you were spot on when you said this scenario planning or scenario management is a skill set that we in FP&A really need to take control of. And then the other word I wrote down here is this radical collaboration. I think in the commodity industry, there's a phrase which says, never waste a good crisis. I think these kind of crises should bring the best out of the FP&A function. So great opportunity to earn our seat at the table. So spot on, and a very nice insights, Chris.
Thank you so much, Mark. Tom, what would be your commentary?
Awesome. Chris, great presentation. I like Mark. I love the radical collaboration. I think that radical is right. And your whole X as an external FP&A, getting outside of your unit into the business, if you will, and maybe even beyond, is another really important concept, because with everything changing as fast as it is, FP&A professionals have to be really, really close to the market and know what's going on inside that organization, right? So you can make those points. And yeah, I think overall it was great. I love your walk down the memory lane, although it's amazing how fast that 9 months has come and continuing. And your point that you never really stopped planning, right? It was like, what's the next fork? It was just, we see it in our own small organization. It's just constantly going, like taking the sounding in a bay or something, right? Finding out the depth of the water. You're constantly trying to say, where is it? Where are we? And what might be just around the bend? So kudos, good session.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chris. Now this is the timing for the next polling question, and we would like to check how is the situation with FP&A business partnering in your organization. So I'm launching the poll, and again, if you can start voting and choose one of those descriptions that is the best description for your organization. So which of the following statements is the best description of your FP&A team's business engagement? Always involved early, bring a lot of valuable insights, always ask to provide financial analysis, but not more, involved only because it's mandated by senior leadership, sometimes involved, sometimes left out, or usually excluded. So I can see that almost 50% of you already voted. We would like to ask you to continue to vote. More than 55%, more than 60%. Thank you for sharing. I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the results with everyone. Interesting results as well. Chris, can you see the results now?
I can indeed.
So can you comment on this?
Yeah, I would say, I think my message is going to be to the folks that are sometimes involved, sometimes left out, or usually excluded. I would say, don't get discouraged. Some business leaders and business partners just don't know what they need until they actually see it, especially if it's not their area of expertise. So look for areas where things are falling short and where FP&A can add value. And typically that can be value analysis, business insight. Have those conversations. There's one or two great articles in the board website that talk about the first 90 days of business partnering. Those I felt were really good frameworks to look at, but broadly look to see where your skill set and the needs of the business can overlap, and you can add some value there outside of normal reporting and planning routines. And I think that is where you can get into the business conversations where you're sometimes being left out.
Excellent, thank you so much. And Mark, what would be your quick commentary on this?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can only agree with Chris's comments. I was hoping that the first item would come out as a winner. I would have rated ourselves in that same bucket, so very nice to see that. But I think the sometimes involved, sometimes left out, I think we've all lived through that period in our FP&A journey. So nice to see that we are making progress, and actually very happy to see that there's only a few people who feel excluded at times. So some work to do, but happy to see most ones have progressed.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your commentaries, and thank you to all of those people who voted and shared your journey with us. I'm hiding the results, and now this is the good timing to look at the next 3 trends. You can see that one of the trend is repeated, it's xP&A, but also we are going to look at the subject of bridging the strategy execution gap and what is the role of FP&A in this. And then of course, driver-based performance management. Mark, the stage is yours. So please, if you can share your experience with us.
Yeah, which I will happily do, Larissa. So thank you for that. The same as Alex, the second speaker, I work for one of the largest privately held companies in the United States, and that's Cargill in this case. My name, as you can see here, is Mark de Haas, and I'm the finance director for a global cocoa and chocolate business. And I can guarantee you there's worse businesses to work for. And I'm based out of the Amsterdam office. I have about 20 years, just over 20 years of experience in different finance roles across the globe. And I've helped designing the FP&A function for the cocoa and chocolate business, but that was part of a global initiative that Cargill went through. We have about $3.5 to $4 billion worth in sales. And again, that's a lot of chocolate. And with those revenue numbers, we're kind of a medium-sized business within the Cargill group. Now, we run a global business, a fairly complex business, and we're using integrated business planning as our management tool. Running that process now for a couple of years, I'm identifying 3 trends that we'll talk about in this presentation. The first one is a strategy execution gap. The second one is driver-based performance. And the third one is the widening scope of FP&A activities I see, and I think that's a result of an evolving function. So Larissa, please move on to the next slide. Thank you. Now, I think all of us are involved in strategies, in bigger or in smaller parts. I've been involved in strategies and I've managed strategies over the last years quite a bit. And typically the timing horizon that we see for strategies are 5 years out. Now, I like the process a lot, actually, doing deep dive in your industry, analyzing trends, defining and identifying capabilities that you need as a business to grow, set up the investment programs that are needed to generate the returns, and then without a doubt, at least for me, but I suspect most of us on the phone will have the same, the end result is this nice hockey stick of your earnings projections. And then, of course, you present it to the board or to a management team. If you did a good job, there's a nice applause. But then the next day you wake up and reality kicks in. I think it's another month-end that is hitting your computer screen. A new forecast cycle comes in, variance analysis that need to be done. And really, before you realize it, you're actually acting at the bottom of the pyramid you're seeing here. So you're focusing on realizing your annual targets for that year. So what now has happened to that ambitious strategy and the hard work that went into that? So this is the gap that I've identified and we have identified many times and that we wanted to address. So one way to do that, and that's how we do it, is we've got 3-year roadmaps, identifying that or filling that void between the strategy horizon and your annual operating plan. It's pretty detailed, year-on-year milestones, very clear assumptions, and it's very hard work, intellectually pushing yourselves, because what are those intermediate goals? How do you define the accountability to achieve those goals? And what are the specific deliverables? So some examples of those intermediate goals can be building relationships with potential allies or acquisition partners that you want to acquire going forward. How do you establish bridgeheads or startups in regions where you're not active today? Or how do you build R&D capabilities if you need to develop certain products that you don't have in your portfolio? Now, all this stuff, this intermediate stuff, will take years. It's not something you do overnight. But with these roadmaps, you can actually motivate your organization and the people you work with for realizing those goals that don't have a direct impact on their annual comp, right? So you push them really to focus on realizing the strategy. Now, a big benefit of that as well is that your annual operating plan becomes a lot easier to achieve. And that brings me to the next theme. Go ahead, Larissa. Yep, thank you. Yep, so that's the forecasting process. So, so as I said, we've implemented IBP, and that's a rigorous set of cycles. And every month we have a new crystal ball with a 24 months forecast. Before that, we did an annual budget, as many of us, and we just compared ourselves with the budget and ended up with hardly any forecast. Now, this is a proven concept, and I can vouch for it, that connects sales, production, R&D, and finance all together. So you provide a beautiful picture for management so they can anticipate future threats or capture future opportunities in an early stage. Or at least that's the concept. So here you see 3 sets of data, each containing 24 months of forecasting. And we quickly found out by doing a deep dive here that there's heavy bias in those forecasts. There was a very negative forecast when people knew the forecast was used for target setting. Sales was not really challenged. Costs were not always updated, but we also had to fight many egos. So it's not completely fact-based and data-driven. And this is exactly where the solution lies, right? So you need to focus and find those objective and independent data points. Sales regression analysis can be a great insight to challenge your sales force. Inflation to forecast your costs. Yeah, don't ask for a cost increase, but just put the increase in there. Or simple GDP growth to figure out what revenues will do. So push yourself really, really hard beyond the obvious drivers and find those trends. Look at what your customers are looking for, and that's probably a good indication. So having a discussion based on these fact-based drivers is resulting in a much richer discussion and gives you much better insight in the outlook of your business performance. Now, this requires, of course, to step out of your comfort zone to build this robust story. And that's the next trend I would like to talk about. So, Larissa. Thank you. So 4 or 5 years ago, when we started on the FP&A journey, we kind of created and brainstormed and built the model that you see here on the screen. Now, at the time, it looked really, strange. It didn't really resonate, but we thought these steps needed to be taken to, realize our North Star, which you can see here. And today we call it actually holistic value management. So to reach it, we would need to take a few steps. And you can see that in these circles and words. And thinking about advanced analytics, machine learning, a data strategy roadmap, automated forecasting, I mean, that was all way out of our comfort zone. And in many cases, we had no clue what to talk about. But listening to what Pras mentioned, to what Chris talked about, and what Alex shared with us, I think many of these trends start to come back. Now, I think all these themes focus us and forces us to look outside of our comfort zone. And I think this is where, the next steps of development for the FP&A function is. So I think it's a lot to summarize, but I think being successful will ultimately be the result of being able to continue to learn, build our networks inside and outside the company, and being able to influence the direction of our business. So I think we have a nice journey ahead of us, but this is it for me. So Larissa, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for sharing your experience. Really very interesting journey of your company. I would like to invite Tom and Pras to give your key takeaways from those several trends. Tom, what would be your commentary, please?
I think, well, it's great that you ended on this slide, Mark, because that segues into what I talk about, which is this whole idea of talent management and the new competencies for the future. And you did a great job of this whole xP&A or xFP&A that you talked about and a couple others refer to is back to this notion of you've got to get outside your comfort zone and outside your department, so to speak, and out in the business, right? To really do this. So I think it's very well done. I loved your imagery on these last two charts. There's a lot going on. So clearly you guys have built a lot in your whole process.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Tom. Pras, your commentary, please.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that Mark was honest about it. I mean, he said that a lot of this was outside their comfort zone. It wasn't easy, I'm sure, but it's paid off clearly dividends. I mean, I look at everything they do. It's so strategic in terms of, it's automated forecasting. It's, using business intelligence, visualization, and analytics to explain and convey the results. I mean, Mark hasn't mentioned it per se, but I'm sure he's able to now really collaboratively work across his organization with those he wants, because he's not just looking at Excel grids, he's looking at advanced visualization. He has machine learning and AI behind him, and advanced analytics and such, automated forecasting to really focus on scenarios, focus on things that might happen versus just, again, as I mentioned before, working on scheduled plans. So again, it's great that you were honest, Mark, about it being outside the comfort zone of you and the organization, and I'm sure it's paid its dividends, as you've explained.
Thank you so much, Pras. Once again, Mark, thank you for your excellent presentation. Now this is the timing for the next polling question. We would like to hear from you. What is the top skill you need for you and your team in the year 2021? Can you choose the one that is the most important for you? So the polling question is launching, and you will start. Please, can you start to vote as soon as you see it? So what is the top skill you need for you and your team in year 2021 and beyond? Anticipation and agility, adaptability, collaboration and communication, tech savviness, or strategic and critical thinking. I can see that more than 50% of you voted. Just a few seconds, and we will share the results. So more than 65% of you voted, almost 70%. I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the result with you. Yes, interesting result as well. Mark, when you see the result, can you start commenting, please? We can see that 21% say that it's anticipation and agility, But the biggest ones, the biggest percentage is coming from strategic and critical thinking and collaboration and communication. Both of them are 29%. What would be your commentary?
Yeah, thanks for that. I like the collaboration and communication part. I think we owe our seat at the table by this kind of skill set. So yeah, fully recognize that. And then the last point also resonates big time. I did talk about the strategy gap. So being strategic, having that critical, and the word I would have put in there probably would be independent thinking that you need to bring to the table also resonates. So nice scores, Larissa.
Thank you so much, Mark. Tom, what would be your key takeaways from those votings?
I think the strategy and critical thinking shows up in just about every poll we do with finance and accounting professionals. So that's often number one. Collaboration, communication right behind it. And in light of everyone's talks today, I think every one of our panelists talked about the need to collaborate and be better at telling the story of what you're doing in your analysis. And then third, anticipation and agility has been one that we've identified for quite a while now, and it's many of you referred to it as the forward-looking or windshield view. The whole notion that we have to move into a longer-term horizon and begin to analyze that to help navigate this crazy world that we're in. So very affirming, if you will.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to everyone who voted. Excellent results. I'm hiding the results of the poll. And now this is the timing for our last session. And it's about very interesting but new and fresh concept of T-shaped FP&A professional. Normally we are talking about specialist versus generalist, but here it looks like an FP&A we need to be both. So it's T-shaped. Tom Hood is going to share the experience with us. Tom, you're welcome. The microphone is yours.
All right. Thank you, Larissa. So let's go to our first slide, because I think this one, as we like to say, we start with why, and why starts with what we believe. And in the last, I guess, probably decade, we would say in a period of rapid change and increasing complexity, and I'd say this COVID thing has made that even faster, the winners are going to be the people who can learn faster than the rate of change and faster than their competition, or the formula L greater than C squared. Now, this is applicable not just to your organization, but to you all as individuals. So everyone on this call today, we have to keep relevant and stay relevant, and that means we have to keep our learning greater than the rate of change. So I think that started with kind of made us go into a quest about, so if we have to keep our learning faster than the rate of change and competition, what are the things we need to learn? So go to that next slide, and you'll see what we did in terms of our research. So we went to all of the major publications in the last probably 5 or 6 years. A lot have been talking about this fourth industrial revolution. You've heard that, robots are coming, the age of automation. On this panel, right? AI, machine learning, RPA, and what does that automate, right? And I think the other great graph, if you will, was the automation of that mundane stuff to get to that higher level value. And so that requires new skills. And there's a saying we love that says, if you automate, you must elevate the skills of your team. So lots of stuff in the finance and accounting world about automating, and lots of opportunity there. But if you don't elevate the skills of your team, you might not be getting what you're hoping from your group. So we went out to all the latest research. So left is CPA Horizons 2025. That's a crowdsourced US CPA document that looked at skills in the future. Second Machine Age comes out of MIT. Only Humans Need Apply is Thomas Davenport, who's a big data guy, by the way. Jeff Colvin, former editor, I think, of Fortune magazine. Fourth Industrial Revolution is Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, what's going on in Davos right now. And then there was the Institute for the Future, which is like a think tank about what they saw in future skills. And then the 2020 Workplace is another one. So what does a CPA do when you get all that research? You put it in a big spreadsheet and try to correlate it. And next slide shows you what we found out when we laid out all that knowledge, all those books, and said, what do these skills really mean? What are the competencies that we're going to need in this fourth industrial revolution, which are now being accelerated by COVID? So next slide, please. So when we laid that out, we had a hypothesis. We said, we think the crowdsourced version all the way on the far left might actually have been prescient enough to incorporate most of those other skills because they stood quite a bit of survey and test of time. I think something like 75,000 comments went on those on that research. So when we did that, they actually did correlate pretty nicely. The nice thing though is there's some different descriptions in each one of those publications that could be something that you might even explore and go deeper in. But when we took all that research in, correlated it, and said, what does it mean? And that's when we came up with the T-shaped FP&A professional. So if you go to that next slide, we'll show you what we think about this, right? So we think it becomes this big T shape, right? Big horizontal and a deep vertical part. The deep vertical part is what's always been there. It's the core competencies and technical and functional knowledge and expertise of a FP&A professional, accounting, finance, all those different disciplines, along with maybe your industry expertise, which is another whole piece of that learning in a professional's journey. Now, with that, though, is the idea of tech savvy and data analytics. And oftentimes, financial professionals tend to, I call it, stay in the box. And the box is often the ERP box, right? So all the data is technically in the ERP. We would challenge that and say, in the way that things are moving with the big data, AI, machine learning, et cetera, it's time to pull in other data sets that might be outside of your core systems and build that in for correlations and things like that. I think some of that you probably just saw in Mark's presentation. Now, what's critical though is the layer on the top, the horizontal version, which we call them boundary crossing competencies. Now, you heard a whole lot today about FP&A or xP&A, meaning they need to get more external, right? And so that's what these boundary crossing skills do. By the way, boundary crossing skills are the things that machines and robots have the toughest time with. So we kind of boiled those into 5 buckets: leadership and sense making, anticipation and serving evolving needs, strategic and critical thinking, and then synthesizing that intelligence to insight, communication and storytelling, and then integration, collaboration. Turns out that 3 of those 5, the top 3 of those 5 that we just surveyed, are actually in those wide boundary crossing skill sets. Now, all of that is built on the fundamental notion of empathy, trust, and relationships, which we think this whole idea of being more human, which I think is even more important as we move through this COVID world. I think that's going to be one of those, again, skill sets. As more and more things get automated, we also need to be more and more human, we think. So that's how this boils down, Larissa, the whole notion of those skills. Now, we would say what you would do is take those buckets, probably from the other chart we had. We have a whole list of skills under each one of these competencies, and you would prioritize, like, what's the top 5 skills we want in our team? And what do we want to, by level, like what do they need when they come into FP&A? What's a more senior leader need? And what will serve the organization best? And so you prioritize, right? So it's a matter of an exercise, could be done in a spreadsheet, but literally picking the ones that you think are most critical to the things that you are working on. And so I think that's where we see this notion of skill sets, competencies, upskilling, and reskilling. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Excellent presentation, excellent concept. Now I would like to ask Mark and Alex to give you a very quick commentary on this concept of T-shaped FP&A professional. 30 seconds, please. So Mark, what would be your commentary?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. Again, excellent insight, and the research that you showed here really resonates. I think you could have been a brilliant FP&A person by looking how you build it up. So, but I really loved the T-shaped model there. I think it clearly resonates and shows that we need to widen our scope. The question, and it's not for now, maybe for later, that I would have is that how wide will it go, right? Where do those boundaries end? So I'll leave it with that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Alex, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, having that complete set of skills in one same individual is always a challenge, right? We have people that are really good on the analytical skills. Other people are better on the communications and people skills. Having both into the same person is always a challenge. So, and it all comes down to people and people skills. Everything we talk about without people, we won't be able to execute. So how to go about that challenge, Tom, in your experience of combining those different set of skills into one individual, or how could we address that?
Yeah, this is meant really more for a division or a team-based approach, because you're right, you're not going to get all those skills typically in, now maybe a couple of you guys on the panel today have all those skills, but the average human out there, I don't think so. So it's meant to be like for the leader of an FP&A team to take those skills, think about all the projects that you have going on, and then you would literally create a matrix. There's a lot more detail that you would put together to create a curriculum for your FP&A organization. That's how we would suggest you do it. And then you, by level, right? So entry level, manager, senior, and then start to assign what level they start to build out. So the idea is like, it's kind of like balancing strengths out. There's going to be a couple individuals great in the data analytics, a couple great in communication or integrate, you know, those people. And then you want to make sure that you've got some of each in your team, I guess, would be where we go with that. It's not meant for that superhuman FP&A person yet. I think you could get there one day.
It's about the team. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Excellent discussion. Thank you so much, Tom, Alex, and Mark. And now, just before Q&A session, this is the timing for a quick key takeaways from our panelists. Let me remind everyone the top 10 trends that we identified as part of this discussion, and I would like to ask all the panelists to switch on their cameras and their microphones, and I would like to encourage all our participants to continue to send questions. If you have even if you don't have enough time for Q&A to answer your questions, we will be able to answer after this. So now it's about key takeaways. Pras, what would be your 30 seconds key takeaways from your session?
I think the key takeaway for me is that, I mean, you know, it's really anything and everything is possible in 2021. I mean, the tools are all there to help FP&A take things to the next level. And the next level for me, it's really a matter of moving away from the financial planning and more to the analysis and driving added value. And that's really whether it's you're integrating everything via xP&A, you're using AI and machine learning, you're automating things, you're using predictive planning, or you're, you know, got a better understanding of your drivers. So for me, that's the biggest takeaway, that, you know, you don't have to be stuck in the 2020s. You can move ahead through 2021.
Thank you, Pras. Alex, your turn.
Yeah, I think that COVID have brought anything positive is that it has given us the opportunity to be at the table. In many cases, they came back to us. They're coming more to us with questions. So the opportunity is for us to stay at the table by showing that we can provide value, that we can help our companies make better decisions by using these tools and that we talk about. So you know, take on the opportunity and try to stay at the table by being useful and creating value.
Thank you, Alex. Chris, your 30 seconds.
I think we're going to underscore the requirement for collaboration. You know, I refer to Tom's model. You do need, and the poll from Mark's presentation, you do need strategic and critical thinking. You do need technical expertise, and you do need the ability and the roadmap to automate some of our activities, but these remain unprecedented times. No one person has the answer. So you need to collaborate with your stakeholders. And as Alex said, if you've got that seat at the table, this is how you leverage that.
Thank you. I would like to ask Mark to give your key takeaways. 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think for me, the key takeaway is this whole concept of the next normal and what it requires to deal with this, because after COVID, there will be another next normal, and we need to have that agility to cope with that. So I think continue to learn, continue to build your networks while ensuring that you've got your technology environment in place. That's a recipe for success.
Thank you, Mark. Tom, finally you.
I think what I've been fortunate to learn from all of you is that this whole notion of automation, which we know has accelerated dramatically through this COVID piece, critical for FP&A to be leveraging the tools and technologies. And then I want to go back to that radical collaboration. We had a formula we were using one time that said CC is greater than EC. The collaboration curve is greater than the experience curve. And in a world that's moving faster, no one knows everything anymore. So how do you do that? Well, you do it by collaborating. So I think you're right that the astute FP&A, the ex-FP&A professional should be really thinking hard about how they can create that collaboration across the organization and even beyond the organization. Sometimes it's supply chains or customer base. Because that's how you're going to stay ahead, right? It's the combined learning, just like this panel. I mean, the rehearsals that we did for this really were huge learning for each one of us. So thank you, Larissa, for pulling this together, and to all of you out there.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your trends. Thank you so much for your experience. And thank you for sharing the key takeaways as well. So we are opening Q&A session right now. I would like to remind everyone, don't worry, we have enough time to answer your questions. If not enough time at this webinar, we will be able to get back to you after the meeting. So Q&A session is open, and the first question is to you, Pras. So how do you envision the expansion of technology implementation on current year when CapEx and investment is now extremely limited during because of the COVID situation and economic environment?
Fantastic question. And FP&A technology, whether it's from my organization or my competitors, it's not what it was before. It doesn't require on-premise. It doesn't require hardware. It doesn't require expensive consultants. It's really do it yourself. I mean, as I mentioned, or you've heard through other presentations, there's cloud-based FP&A tools that you can effectively buy a few licenses of in a subscription manner. So it's it can be counted as OpEx in that sense. And the beauty of all this is most organizations and vendors have trial licenses. So effectively you can try it out. If you don't like it, move on to some other vendor and then find what you like. So use this time to set the foundation of where you want to go, do the exploration, and if you see the business value, well, then you've gained your returns there. So it's not as expensive as it was before, but it adds a lot more value. That I can promise you.
Thank you so much, Pras. The next question is to Alex. Alex, do you use human impact of your predictive models to adjust the actions? For example, when you have the actuals, do adjust your predictive models with those inputs from people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't remove the humans out of the equation at all. I mean, in fact, the models are all fed initially with those variables that are intuitive, suggested by the business, by the people that know most about the business. Then we keep adding external data if they make the model more accurate, right? But at the end of the day, that collaboration between the data scientist that doesn't know much about the business, but they're experts on building those AI models, and the business itself, the business expert is critical. So we will never remove the business experts out of the equation.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. The next question is to Chris. Chris, how you develop your team to get to this stage? What would be your advice on the key important steps to move to this level?
Well, I think historically, I'm always, there is a technical, well, thank you for the question, first of all. Apart from having the technical experience, which is kind of table stakes, I think what I always look for beyond the willingness, of course, is kind of an intuitive understanding of the business. And the way I've always defined that or explained it to analysts is when you run your numbers and you're looking at your PowerPoint or your PDF and a number just doesn't look right, and then you go to investigate it and you find out that a formula was off or numbers didn't refresh, that's when you're starting to understand your business intuitively. And you definitely want to catch that before your business partner does. So I think I tend to work it in a way that people can operate in a safe space if they're new at it, and then you kind of take the helmet off, or you take the bumpers out of the gutter, so they can take a little bit of risk and present things, and maybe it's at a project-based approach. We don't stick them in the deep end of the pool. They can do things on a project-based approach or an ad hoc approach, and we see what they can do, right? You quickly discovered that this is a skill that can be learned, but it's, there's some intuitive communication skills that also sometimes are natural, but sometimes also need to be learned. And that's presentation of data. It's simplifying data. It's being able to not just explain what's on a slide, but what you're going to do about it. What are you recommending to the business to do about it? So it is a kind of a multi-step process. I'm sorry I can't distill it down to a pat answer, unfortunately.
Thank you, Chris. Mark, the next question is to you. How long does this incredible transformation typically take? How long time did it take you? And what would be your recommendation on the most important step to implement it?
Yeah, that's a simple answer, Larissa. I don't think it will ever stop. I think you need to continue to develop yourself, to explore new technologies. And for the record, the last chart that I showed in my slide, the top right part is still very much aspirational, right? So there's big chunks that we still need to complete. But I think you need to have a plan and then continue to push yourself to find those new areas to learn and collaborate. So time, I do not dare to give an answer on that, Larissa. I think it's a factor of so many things, budget availability, resource availability. I think it's important that you go through this journey at your own pace and at the pace that the organization gives you. So hope that helps.
Thank you, Mark. And the last question is to Tom. A very interesting question. Tom, what advice would you give to a young professional trying to break into financial planning and analysis, FP&A? If you look back at the beginning of your career, what do you wish you could have told yourself?
I think, and it's funny because the one thing that when we talk to college students looking at their careers, the one thing they write down when you give them a presentation, because today's students almost write down nothing, right? They just sit there and listen, or they're not taking notes typically in a little presentation like that. So one thing they write is L greater than C squared. So I think whatever that is, you want to make sure that you're learning faster than your peers and colleagues, and faster than what you see going on in your competition. So you can seek out mentors and all that to give you tools or what you need to do for advanced education, or just even casual things that you do, but reading books and magazines and using social media, but keep that L greater than C squared. That would be my advice.
Be curious, for sure.
Yeah, be curious. That's a good way of putting it.
Excellent. So this is the time for us to conclude this Q&A session, but we definitely have more questions, and questions are still coming, and we will answer your questions after this webinar. We will get back to you through email. Thank you so much, panelists, for your great insights today. Great top 10 trends that are shaping FP&A this year. I would like to say thank you so much to all our participants for voting and for these excellent questions, and also for being part of our global community. And of course, I would like to say thank you so much to our partners and sponsors. Thank you so much, SAP, for being our global partner. And thank you so much, Business Learning Institute, for your support with this webinar. And just before you go, let me remind you that we are planning some additional meetings, and we would like to invite you to our next global webinars about planning for uncertainty, what are the building blocks of agile FP&A, and also FP&A trends webinar on data visualization, moving from insight to impact. On this presentation, you will find the links, and the registration process already started. And finally, I would like to say that let us share the insights, let us share the latest trends. If you have interesting case studies to share with us, please stay connected. But so far, I would like to say once again, thank you so much to our great panelists. I so hope to meet you in the second half of this year. Stay safe, and let us move FP&A to the next level, and let us be connected. All the best, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
Larissa.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Larissa. Bye, everyone. Bye.